at the end, it's about bringing out, discovering the divine feminine and the masculine in each of us.
There's aspects of the evolutionary, right, that are specifically societal driven and that are programmed, right? There's a lot of things that were, that I think stem from that biologic and that evolutionary perspective.
The conscious awareness of when you can go back and forth and harness that masculine, step back into your feminine. So yeah, we have to be able to acknowledge it's there and then understand how to work with it to improve on it.
Because my divine feminine is so evolved now, even when I show up in a more masculine, way in that leadership role, like that feminine still shines through. And so there's still something so different, right? That each of us, man and woman, has to bring to the table. Who you are in your heart and your soul is really not a gender, right? It's
right.
That's more of an energy. If you think about like the extremes, right? And that's oftentimes, I think, in society what people know the masculine and feminine to be. Like that's what's more common is are the extremes, right? Everybody's
just simply living their programming, their biological programming. They're living the feminine, they're living the masculine, they're playing out the roles that they feel like they're supposed to play out innately and programming wise.
The patterns, the energy, all of that stored stuff that you've been stuffing down, pretending like it wasn't there. Then you go to have a healthy relationship and all that shit starts to show up.
Hey everyone, it's Joey from the Reality Practice Network. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned after the show and find out how you can work one-on-one with your show host as they guide you through this process of ascension. Until then, enjoy the show. Just as you were talking about it, we obviously have certain differences in opinion on certain aspects. I think that at the end of the day, it's about bringing out, discovering the divine feminine and the masculine in each of us, right? However, I think we need to understand the biological, the evolutionary process. For you, it sounds like you used to be simply living in that biological state, which is where we all begin. But you've done all the work. You've progressed up into understanding when, conscious awareness of when you can go back and forth and harness that masculine, step back into your feminine, but not allow the feminine to take over in a sense. And same with the masculine. We have to stay in control and be aware of what we are, who we are, and we still have to perform. We still have to protect and allow the feminine to create, to be in that safe space to create. But at the same time, it's us learning, like you said, that toxic masculinity, whatever that is out there. That's simply the biological aspect of the masculine. I don't think we can ignore it. And the feminine, like you said, the emotional state. But I think if we start off discussing kind of what we are, the biological roles, the innate instincts, the roles of each of them from a simplistic point of view. And then we start to dive into the different aspects of how we evolve into becoming that conscious creator of both.
Well, and also appreciating, because there is some of that biologic evolutionary, but there's aspects of the evolutionary, right, that are specifically societal driven, right, and that are programmed, right. There's a lot of things that were, that I think stemmed from that biologic and that evolutionary perspective.
Right. But we can't eliminate the fact that it exists. The biological aspect exists in this realm, in this dimension. We have to at least acknowledge it. We can't ignore it. So yeah, we have to be able to acknowledge it's there and then understand how to work with it to improve on it.
Well, and also the evolution of what has come beyond that, right? I mean, if you think about it, an American household in the 1930s compared to, an American household in the 1990s compared to, an American household today, or anywhere in the world for that matter. There's tremendous evolution in what's taken place, and creating and understanding like that value, right? And I think you're seeing it more and more in the world today with more female leaders, because even showing up in right in a little bit more of of my performance energy, like, because my divine feminine is so evolved now, even when I show up in a more masculine way in that leadership role, like that feminine still shines through. And so there's still something so different, right, that each of us, man and woman, has to bring to the table when you're really bringing to the table like the core essence of your being and who you are in your heart and your soul. Like, who you are in your heart and your soul is really not a gender, right? It's
right.
That's more of an energy. And that's going to shine through when you are opening up your mouth and leading in a very true and authentic way. That energy and that essence shines through, and again, that transcends anything being masculine or feminine. It just is.
Right. I agree completely on all of that.
Yeah, I think that has to. I mean, I think that has to be, kind of shared of what is, what are those, kind of innate traits and characteristics, of that feminine masculine energy. What are the unhealthy characteristics? Again, in an episode, if you want to speak about, and I'm always going to chime in, and I'm going to speak about not using terminology of a wounded or toxic masculine or wounded or toxic feminine. And the reason being is because that's not supporting, right? That's not supporting the evolution or helping anyone by talking down to certain things that have just become information, have just become what's known, right?
Sensationalized is a good, I think, word for it. The idea of that there's something wrong with masculine, but there's nothing wrong with masculinity or femininity in its pure nature, where it, being overly masculine 100% is not good, because it becomes dominating, it becomes controlling in a sense. But being overly feminine is not good either, because like you said, it's emotional, it's out of control, as opposed to being in control of your emotions and your focus, really.
Yeah, well, and I mean, if you think about like the extremes, right? And that's oftentimes, I think, in society, what people know masculine and feminine to be, like, that's what's more common are the extremes, right? And the extremes are the unhealthy aspects and the unhealthy characteristics of either, just like the extreme pole of anything is going to be unhealthy, right? You can throw exercise in as an example, right? There's extremes, right? Like there's like complete lethargy and you're, and you don't ever get up off the couch, right? Like, okay, well, that's an extreme inactivity, which is unhealthy. Or there's people who over exercise who are, exercising hours a day, and that's an extreme of what is anything. Once you move beyond to that extreme place, it then becomes unhealthy, right? Because can you over exercise? Well, yes, you absolutely can, right? So that when you move beyond, the extreme, there's a healthy range on either end, and that extreme is always going to fall into an unhealthy category. And I think that's really where what most people's understanding is built upon is an understanding of the extreme of the unhealthy extreme, and not the truth of what true masculinity and what true femininity is, and then taking it beyond that into the level of the divine masculine, divine feminine, which then far supersedes that.
I agree. Yes. I think a lot of where I come from on what I talk about is because my mentor on this he was so masculine. I didn't always agree with it. I butted heads a lot often, because my wife and I we were taught together from the same person, and he came with this extreme masculine point of view. So my wife got to see that whole point, and experience it. She didn't resonate very much with it, because she resonated with it, but she also was like me. It's like, I think he's missing something there. I don't discredit him. He's very good at what he does, but at the same time, I've always had issues where I didn't think that he quite understood, the spirituality of it all, the divinity of it all. He was a science-based, like biology only, and this is how we operate. And he wasn't able to allow himself to go into that spiritual connected realm, right? To experience everything. He was like a Mensa guy, like lifetime Mensa, super intelligent, but very analytical, very masculine, in nature, in terms of single-minded focus, everything.
But at the root of that, in truth, he's very disconnected from himself and very disconnected from the truth of who he really is, right? Because who he really is not this overly masculine being that is only a masculine being, right? Who is pretending like his, the feminine aspects of him don't exist. And again, that's that programming of this macho, super masculine, that sharing or showing emotion is weakness. I mean, how many men feel that sharing or showing emotion is weakness, and what that inability to share or show emotion creates is an inability to connect, right? And so you're not going to have a deep, meaningful connection with a woman if you're completely out of touch with the ability to feel, to share or show emotion, right? How are you going to connect with your children? How are you going to connect with a woman? You wonder why your last fucking 5 marriages didn't work out. It's because you can't connect,
right?
Because those traditional roles, it's so superficial. It's so superficial. And again, that inability to share or show emotion, right? That inability to be vulnerable, it is probably one of the biggest curses of society, because it truly makes us unable to connect. And how do I know? Because I lived my life in that place, and I lived disconnected, not only from myself, but from everyone around me for most of my life, right? You put up the walls, you put up the barriers, you block yourself off because you don't want to get hurt, right?
Yeah.
and there's a lack of coping mechanism. There's a lack of emotional intelligence. There's a lack of emotional maturity that takes place in that evolution.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. You know, the idea of showing emotion, showing weakness. At this point in our evolution, it's hard for the divine masculine to show his true emotions and his true weaknesses and vulnerability to the feminine if she has not stepped into her divine feminine. I think that's where the issue's stemming from, is we don't have enough divine masculines out there, and we don't have enough divine feminines out there. Everybody's just simply living their programming, their biological programming. They're living the feminine, they're living the masculine, they're playing out the roles that they feel like they're supposed to play out innately and programming wise. But at the end of the day, you can't, when we step into our true masculine, being vulnerable, being emotional is okay if, I believe, we're dealing with a divine feminine, somebody that's progressed in their evolution. If we show that weakness or that emotion to just a regular somebody off the street, or our significant other, but they haven't stepped into that divine feminine yet, it's going to fuck them up. It's going to cause so much fear and panic in them because they don't know the difference between the two. They only know the biological, emotional response that they would get. And when they see that weakness or perceived weakness, they might freak out. Whereas somebody in your space that's conscious where you're at, you respect that vulnerability. And does that, am I on the right path here?
Well, when the correction of the perceived weakness, because again, the programming is that vulnerability, whether you're a man or a woman, right? The programming is that vulnerability is weakness. I mean, 99% of people, pretty much, you take a poll, 99% of people are going to feel that is true to them, whether they're a man or a woman, that vulnerability is weakness. And that's the programming. That's what we're taught. In truth, right? In truth, vulnerability is not weakness. But I do understand absolutely what you're saying in regards to there. That's what from a holding space perspective and from a feminine perspective. Yes, like if you truly desire that deeper, more meaningful connection, and allowing a man to be vulnerable, to show up in his full truth and in that essence, yes, you do have to be able to hold space for that as a woman. I mean, because that's really having your feminine completely open and also being completely in understanding of the strength in that. And so that's so vulnerability, whether you're a man or a woman, is actually a divine gift of strength, right? It's a divine gift of strength, but it's not perceived that way. And so for as a woman, once I became truly evolved in my divine feminine, then men show up and they talk to me and they share these things, and they're kind of like, and then they're like taken aback. They're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't ever share that with anybody. And I don't know why I'm so comfortable talking to you. Right. And that's a complete evolution in who I am, and just completely holding that space. Like there's no judgment, there's no judgment in who you are. There's no judgment in the fact that you're feeling this. There's no judgment in the fact that you're having a hard time. I mean, we're all beings, right? Like we all care for our mom. Like it's all hard if our loved one isn't well, it's hard whether you're a man or you're a woman if you're having to take care of a parent, right? Like the shit is hard.
Right.
And so just being able to, to talk about that, for a man, they're like, oh gosh, like there's this fear of like being judged or being seen as weak. And it's like, no, like that's powerful, right? Like you just showed me that you're human.
Yes, right. I completely agree. It's the being vulnerable is a superpower, 100%. And we've been taught as masculine that we can't be vulnerable. And it just made me remember and think, at the end of the day, there is nobody else but you. You're the only one here. You're creating all of this. You're half feminine, you're half masculine. And it's only the perception we're giving ourselves in our mind, the programming we're giving ourselves, that we're either or, that I have to be this way because this is what I was told I have to be, or I have to be this way as a feminine because that's what I was told I have to be. And at the end of the day, going within and understanding that you are both, and that there's no judgment either which way, that it's having that divine compassion for yourself, forgiving yourself for not remembering that we're just one piece, half and half, that we're each side of the spectrum here, but we beat ourselves up, which maybe causes more masculinity, in the wrong way, or more feminine to go down the wrong. We beat yourself up as a feminine or as a masculine. We get emotional, we cry, we lose control. Or, if you beat yourself up as a masculine, maybe you become harder, more strict, stern. You don't want to be as vulnerable. You shut yourself off, right? To where it's like, I don't want to share that. I'm never going back there again because that ended up in disaster or whatever. I think a lot of that has to do with, it's just the forgetting that there is only us and that we have the ability to see both sides of it and to experience both sides.
Well, and remembering too that protective mechanism, that coping mechanism to block it off, to shut it out, to put up the walls, like, that's not just men, right? Like that's what we're up against, societally as a whole, and that's the battle that both men and women are fighting. Because if you think about from that evolutionary perspective, again, we're not talking about that 1930s household, right? We're talking about a whole different household where women are in the workplace, women are in places of leadership and higher levels of success. And what does it take to achieve those things? Well, it takes those masculine characteristics, right? Of the action, of the perseverance, of, so it takes those masculine driven actions. So when you think about, successful women in the workplace, you are dealing with women who have shut off many of those feminine aspects in order to show up and succeed, in order to overcome some of those lower frequency, traditional masculine roles. So you have women who have done the same thing, right? Who have, and truly, and I think that society has done a disservice to everyone, right? From a perspective of schooling and how we're raised. Like, we're not taught healthy coping mechanisms at a young age. And so the coping mechanism for men and for women becomes to shut it off, right? To shut it off, to put up the walls, to protect ourselves, because I don't ever want to feel that way again. I don't ever want to hurt this way again. And so what do? We suppress it. We shut it off. But that's one of the biggest things that people don't realize is all of that suppressed emotion, that suppressed pain, it's still stored in your body on a cellular level. So then Then you evolve as a human being, and you maybe have some sort of event that triggers an awakening, whether you're a man or a woman, right? And so you become more conscious, you become more aware, but the patterns, the energy, all of that stored stuff that that you've been stuffing down, pretending like it wasn't there. Then you go to have a healthy relationship, and all that shit starts to show up because you just stuffed it down and you thought it was gone, but the truth is it's really not gone. It's just stuffed down. You think it's buried, you think it's gone, and it's not. So all of that stuff shows back up, right? And again, it's and you can't sit back and say, well, this is just masculine or this is just feminine. That's the truth of where a lot of women are.
Hey everyone, it's Joey again. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked the show. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up if you did. We'd love to hear your comments too. And if you haven't already, please make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell to never miss an episode from the Reality Practice Network. As I mentioned before the show, I wanted to extend an exclusive offer to you, the viewers of the Reality Practice Network. For all of you watching this video, you're undoubtedly experiencing an awakening and are searching for more explanation into the experiences you're having. Now is the time to explore who and what you truly are. For a limited time, you can now work one-on-one with your show host. Click the link in the description box below to start your journey, or learn more by going to myrealitypractice.com/ascension and let your ascension begin. And remember to ask yourself, what reality are you choosing to create today?